Well, the Howdy Modi event, which was held in the U.S. state of Texas, may just turn out to be the biggest highlight of Prime Minister Modi's political career. Let's take you to the big takeaways from this historic speech at the NRG Stadium in Houston. Well, number one, in his second term, Modi may be a more confident and decisive politician than ever, but that does take away the fact that he remains a people's leader. This could be seen in the way he stressed on the people-centric issues such as sanitation, gas connections, passport and even data affordability in his speech, making a strong pitch to potential investors. The Prime Minister referred to the cheap cost of mobile data in India and the increasing use of digital technology to set up businesses. Now, these are subjects that many leaders would avoid raising on a global stage. Number two, the positive theme of the speech, from progress to possibilities and welfare. The Prime Minister's speech was full of hope. He repeatedly stressed on the idea of a new India, which he said was his government's biggest oath at the moment, and that they were working very hard to realize this dream. Also, the Prime Minister made a strong case for one India in the presence of the U.S. President. He was not looking to claim credit for any of his government's decisions, a fact that was proven when he urged the 50,000-strong crowd at the NRG Stadium for a standing ovation for all the Indian lawmakers who voted in favor of scrapping Article 370, even those from the opposition who had voted in favor of the government's move. This gesture proves that whatever the differences back home, the Prime Minister would not let that affect India's image globally. Also, he shamed Pakistan and Imran Khan's government without even naming it. This was for the second time, first in Russia, right next to President Vladimir Putin, and now in the US in front of the President Donald Trump and a battery of U.S. government officials. The Prime Minister does not shy away from calling out Pakistan-sponsored terror in front of world leaders. He has proven that when it comes to terror and India's security, there can be no compromise. And lastly, his confident leadership was on full display at the event. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. President and the leader of a formidable democracy and economy. The Prime Minister's speech and the rapturous reception that the NRG Stadium gave only proves that India does not bother with incremental change, but is rather pushing for comprehensive change.
And he has already...
And well, joining us now is Ambassador G. Parthasarathy for more on the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. Ambassador Parthasarathy, that was quite an event there yesterday, the Howdy Modi event in Houston. Huge crowds there. What did you think about what the Prime Minister had to say in his speech?
I've spoken to the Indian community members whom I know pretty well in the United States, and they were thrilled that an Indian Prime Minister could actually host the American President in the United States in front of such a large gathering. Mm-hmm. I think also the fact of the matter is that Trump's election gatherings barely would draw 1/10 of this crowd.
Yes.
So for the U.S. President, it was something to welcome. In terms of international relations, in terms of U.S. particularly, I think the trend had been set earlier the date, on that same day, with the Petronet signing a $2.5 billion agreement for long-term purchases of gas. In effect, that was a signal to the United States that we're willing to deal with you on a long-term basis and invest. This sort of thing is new.
Yes.
For suddenly to have this sort of large investment, because even now they've got huge supplies, their prices are very competitive, but they're still to build the terminals for export in on a comparable size with what you would find, say, in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So
so India is a huge potential market for America in terms of oil as
yes,
well,
and
other things.
One other thing is, I think we must also recognize in India that we were not entirely blemishless when we got into this trade argument with the United States. Some aspects of our import policy made no sense. I mean, stents for cardiac surgery.
Yeah.
We had put duties on them. The number of people having heart surgery and obviously when you go for heart surgery, you require the best stents.
Yeah. So there was a rethink required on things like this.
So there has been a rethinking in India, and I think what is setting the atmosphere is that once those GSP sanctions go, then, which they will, with some kind of movement on our side also, it will be a good thing. It will be, because whether we like it or not, and all this talk about China is a closed market.
Right.
The United States is the most open market in the world, even more than Europe. So I think the opening out on this trade is important because we have a $24 billion surplus with the United States in trade. And I think the other thing which important statement he made was on data processing. I mean, this is going to be the future. How well you do it.
Yeah.
And he made it very, very clear that the cheapest and most efficient data processing.
Yeah, so very important issues that would come up in that bilateral that happens later in the week as well. I mean, but this Howdy Modi event,
really,
it was just setting the tone.
It was also wowed many Americans.
Yeah.
Because for Trump to go out to a gathering...
Well, he's not the most important person.
Well, he certainly was the invited guest. In protocol terms, he was the invited guest. Though the function was in honor of Mr. Modi, that sort of treatment, that sort of camaraderie, he hasn't had with any other Indian community. And amongst the Asian communities, he has, I think, a particular soft corner for the Indians. It's the people employed, the number of judges appointed in India and so on. So I think from India's point of view, great, but the real business will be transacted in New York when they meet.
Sure.
But this has, as they would have say, set the tone.
Set the tone. I do want to talk to you about the other issues that he highlighted, Ambassador Parthasarathy. We just look at the key meeting during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's trip, of course, will be that dialogue with several nations on counter-terrorism as well. And Prime Minister Modi will also be addressing the leaders' a dialogue on strategic responses to terrorist and violent extremist narratives organized by a group of countries along with the UN Secretariat, which deals with the Office of Counterterrorism. Now, the meeting will be led by the King of Jordan, Abdullah, the second President Emmanuel Macron of France, and the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. The countering terrorism and extremist narratives using internet and cyberspace will be Modi's focus on for this dialogue. The counter-terror meeting will also be attended by global technology giants as governments plan to involve them in preventing the spread of terror online. The UN meeting on countering terrorism comes ahead of the Financial Action Task Force decision next month on whether to blacklist Pakistan for not doing enough to counter terrorism. Modi has made a big global push to draw the world's attention to terror in India's neighborhood in the recent times. Since his first foreign visit to the Maldives after his re-election and his address at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Bishkek, Prime Minister Modi has called for a global conference to address the loopholes in counter-terror measures. France had welcomed Prime Minister Modi's suggestion, while BRICS nations said that the proposal will be seriously discussed during the BRICS summit later this year. Countering extremist narratives using internet and cyberspace are likely to be key areas of focus, and especially, of course, touching upon Jammu and Kashmir, the incidents there. But India's bid to get the world to focus on the scourge of terror in the subcontinent has shown results. The UN designated Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar a global terrorist, and of course there have been condemnations for the Pulwama attack, and Mr. Akbaruddin, of course, summed up the focus on terror during his trip to the US earlier this week, where he said, and I quote, "Our people have suffered enough and we would like the international community to act in unison to address these issues," unquote. And Ambassador Parthasarathy, now we know that President Donald Trump, of course, has been in some ways involved in this conversation about terrorism every time it's been brought up by India as well. There were indications earlier that he had hinted on some sort of, dialogue which involved him between India and Pakistan. That has been cleared by the Americans. But what do you think about the Prime Minister's comments on terror? And do you think that this time the focus will not be so much on terror, but other issues, bilateral issues between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi?
Terror will certainly be alluded to.
Yeah.
Because you will have aides of both sides who are present, ministers of both sides who are present. Therefore, some framework can be set for how to move ahead. Let us be quite clear that one of the important things which Trump is seeking for electoral reasons more than anything else is an early exit from Afghanistan.
Yes.
I think we'll have to see that, how it proceeds, because that's a decision for the U.S. to take. But we wouldn't like them to leave a vacuum which is filled up by extremist elements, the Taliban, the Tehreek-e-Taliban, the IS and so on. So that is a real fear which we hope will be addressed. But I think more than that, I think global economic issues and our own bilateral, the trade thing is partially settled. It's not going to be fully settled, but we'll get back the GSP. We'll give them some concessions. And one thing I would also like to mention, people don't realize that the biggest paradigm shift in approaching the global warming internationally has come by Mr. Modi.
Yes.
Earlier on, we were regarded as being rejectionist and negative because we took the position that before we make any sacrifices, somebody else should cough out the money, namely the rich developed countries. Mr. Modi is the first Prime Minister of India ever
to make it a central issue.
To say no.
Yeah.
Climate change is bad for us. We are not putting any conditions. We'll come along to see what we can contribute. That is what has won India and him personally the respect of leaders like Angela Merkel and President Macron of France. Now, the United States in environment is completely out thanks to President
Also, a lot
Trump.
of the leaders from around the world are missing the UNGA this time. There are many for own domestic purposes.
Exactly.
Not. So
I
how
think
much teeth this particular meeting will have will also have to be seen.
No, I think what is happening is he is meeting countries in groups, Pacific group, Caribbeans, separately, the heads of government. And that is good, because these are smaller countries which escape our attention.
Do you think that India has been able to pull a real coup here, considering the fact that, of course, the Houston event happened, and now there are about 45 meetings that the Prime Minister has in 7 days, at multilateral forums, bilaterally, and of course with companies. There are about a dozen companies or more.
It's easier for the Prime Minister, but the guys who have to keep notes of what is happening will be very, very busy.
But it's remarkable that so much can be put into...
Yes, I think what has happened is, he is willing to go the extra mile.
Yes.
Even if it tires himself out, he never shows it. So yes, meeting so many leaders, and in any case with neighboring countries, we are always in touch.
Yeah.
And therefore, meeting with people you don't normally meet, and terrorism and environment. These two crucial issues will be addressed seriously.
So you mean climate change, of course, will be addressed. And you were talking a little bit about data privacy earlier. There is a session on that as well, and linking it to terrorism as well. And also the fact that the Prime Minister will be meeting many social media giants as well in the, touching on some of those issues.
Absolutely.
I assume.
He has met the giants of the energy industry.
Yeah.
And the US now is going to, has emerged really, as the largest producer of petroleum natural gas in the world. It's beaten the Saudis. It's outdone the Russians. So it's a huge market. Huge supplying market for us, and it's something we need to look at. Is going to be of the future, because putting all your eggs in the basket of the Persian Gulf
Yeah.
has its risks because instability and other problems.
And it also in a sense improve the trade imbalance, so, the oil importers in some
Yes, that we have to say that to please Mr. Trump.
Yes.
But, facts of life is you can't say you want free trade and then you want balanced trade.
Yeah.
But also the fact is, I think in a way, some of our import restrictions were not exactly in keeping with the spirit of the WTO.
Yeah, sure.
And as I said, stents was one thing, but there are several other issues which are involved.
There's a lot to talk about in this, Ambassador Parthasarathy. Thank you very much for joining us in this edition of our continued coverage, of course, of Prime Minister Modi's...
But as the joke goes, one does not know in the Modi-Trump meeting who was trumped.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Ambassador Parthasarathy, once again. Well, starting today, a special edition of Gravitas will be live from the heart of where all the action is happening. Well, that is New York. Take a look.